Martin. Karen, thank you very much for your presentation today. I really enjoyed your conversation. I appreciated how you highlighted Indigenous worldview and embedded with that notions of relatedness. So for the benefit of the people who weren't able to present and be able to be present for your talk, and have an opportunity, but who are going to have an opportunity to view a short vignette of this, could you give us kind of a brief synopsis of the purpose of your presentation or the argument that you were trying to create within your presentation?
I think the purpose of my presentation was actually to highlight how and where these intersections between Aboriginal languages and Aboriginal homes and communities and identity and worldview and relatedness, as I've theorised it, intersect with the very important goals that we have and everyone has for schooling, and particularly as a huge part of that, learning to be comfortable as well as competent in using English literacies. So I'm looking at those intersections of how they come together and how they might not come together, and what we do next in ways of understanding, not so much about changing them but transforming them, which is a process that evolves over time, not just an instant, well, we've done that, doesn't work, let's get rid of it, try something else. We need to think differently about that for our children and the people who work with them. Now, that drawing on the premise of the discussion today, that if our journey is about knowing who we are and where we come from and why we do the things that we do as Indigenous peoples, then my message to non-Indigenous people would be exactly the same. Who are you when you come and work with our children? How do you do that? Why do you do it that way? And sometimes it might mean knowing that there are other ways of achieving the same outcomes. But essentially, it's about the relationships that can be described in the prepositions. If you're working on us, it's not a good relationship. If you're working with us, it's going to be a good, strong start and a journey that will end up satisfying everybody's and meeting everybody's goals and to certain types of levels, all going well, of course. Yeah. So the message is, you have to know about yourself as a person and as an educator, and then know enough about us, and then the good work can be done. There's still those dominant discourses and theories that basically don't teach educators in those journeys to think in what I call 360 degrees. And then when they're in their own classrooms or early childhood settings, they lose trust in themselves and the effectiveness of their teachers. And when that happens, a flip can start to occur, and they actually thinking this is something that's coming from the children, when equally it's actually something coming from them. So again, it's about your relationships with them as a teacher and your relationships with yourself as a teacher too, just as much as not teaching to children or teaching of them, but teaching with them. So teachers become learners in that arrangement, and the learners are the teachers, and Aboriginal children. And from what I hear from First Nations peoples and Aboriginal peoples and Indigenous peoples throughout the world, believe the power of that in our children, that they are powerful teachers. We just need to be powerful learners with them. Policy implications could be driven more by practice, but then pedagogy, and I'll say it this way, that Aboriginal people will often say they've tried that program with us and it worked to a certain extent, or maybe it didn't work well at all, and then they will say not again. So people feel that they're not being listened to. People also feel they have a chance to, they've not been given the chance to fully understand their own ways of making change and still being themselves as Aboriginal peoples, but equally becoming educated and working and living in mainstream systems. I'm going to draw on one project that's relatively recent. It's called Mentorship Circles, and it's about bringing together people, Aboriginal people in Australia, working in roles in children's services, which is long day care or vacation care, and seeing them as in their professional roles, but getting an understanding of how they navigate and mediate those professional roles, their personal selves and their cultural roles, because all of those people are working in Aboriginal communities, and some of them are working in their own communities, which just adds layers to the richness and the complexities that they just seem to naturally work through. The term mentorship was specifically chosen because it's not so much a master and novice role. It's actually about everybody coming into the space knowing that they have something to contribute. Someone facilitates it at certain times because there is a core aim through there, but then there's a responsibility and an ethos and an ethic to act in mentorship of yourself with others. So the person facilitating isn't a leader all the time. The person facilitating has that understanding of they start something to think around, and then the rest think around that and work together around it. That's that notion of mentorship. Yeah. So that then highlights to them that sometimes in the complexities of their professional lives, that sometimes they feel like they're not being effective at all, when they might be in a space where they're forgetting that they do work in complex places, in complex relationships, and in fact they probably do just as well to manage multi-million-dollar businesses with that type of knowledge and skills and experiences. I think there's a point where there's an involvement where, because we want to do so well for our children, that we will take on board all of those dominant theories and ideologies and systems, because that's the top level that we see. But then there comes a point in the journey where they actually start to see, well, there's more to this that I'm doing. And I think at that point in time, there's really important for someone to come and sit alongside them so they can actually see that the transformations that are happening are part of the journey, but sometimes they can go well and sometimes they not go well. I think people in those roles then put additional expectations on themselves and see themselves as failure, and sometimes they forget the core part of why they came into the role and studied and became teachers, to work with children, to work with families and work in communities. But it's also about the relationship with those people, and then the relationship with themselves. So there's always this ongoing, journey of deciding and working out how's my relationship, thinking and trusting themselves as an educator, but not having to have all of the answers all the time the first time. I'm thinking of many of the preschools and kindergartens and childcare centres in Australia that are now working with second generations and sometimes third generation children or families, which to me, boom, success, and success again. They're doing something right that might come there. But I think in doing the something right, that sometimes there can be high expectations of community who then give over part of that role and their responsibility that they have as parents and carers to teachers and educators. So there's always a fine balance in between there. The limitations, I don't know. If those services are operating with good, clear accountabilities and good, clear programs, and are not selling themselves short or their children short, because I have seen examples where some sort of believe that because they're Aboriginal, then the teaching and learning comes naturally too. I think sometimes that's where the two spheres need to come together. But being Aboriginal doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher. And being a good teacher doesn't make you a good teacher of Aboriginal children. So these are just initial thoughts I've had. Some of it coming from me reflecting on and questioning what I thought I was doing was good work with Aboriginal children. Now I look back and think, I hope that child is okay. You know, and the powerful thing about that is that I know they all are, but I feel a loss at not enjoying my teaching while I was doing it. You know, while those children were there telling me that I don't sing very nicely, so I should be quiet, or I talk too much, or the girls putting their hand on their hip and just shaking their head at me. Things like that. Enjoying the relationship.